Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and today we're talking with Tricia Feijo, author of Called to Stand, How a Small Christian Ministry Courageously Stood Up to Government Tyranny. Tricia, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're delighted to have you. Tricia founded Daniel Chapter 1 in 1986 with her husband Jim and co-hosted the radio program Daniel Chapter 1 Health Watch from 1994 to 2012. A professional homeopath since 1993, she's ministered and preached worldwide. You can visit her website, calledtostand.com. So, Tricia, you opened up a small health food store as a homeopath.
No, I was not a homeopath at that time.
Okay.
That was in 1986, and my husband and I had been married for a few years. We had traveled to communist countries and seen house churches, home churches, and people that were really in need. And so we started Daniel Chapter 1 as a health food store in 1986 with our primary intent to help fund the home churches in communist countries.
Okay, so this was going to be a ministry setting where you're going to use the funds to support mission work in former communist countries.
That's correct. And also a health food store we felt was a way that we could meet people's needs physically, of course. And the Lord brought people in to us for the foods, yes, but we felt that it was a mission field in itself.
So, and that's, it's kind of the way the humanitarian aid centers are in Israel today, is they're helping those that have a need, and they don't share the gospel with them during business hours, but invite them to come back after business hours if they want to know why they make themselves available to offer them free food or for low-cost clothing. So
sure, and I have to say, it is what the Lord Yeshua did himself. He met people's needs. He fed them, he healed them, and he shared the gospel with them.
That's exactly right. So 1986, you have the store, you have the ministry, you're making progress, and what begins to change for you? What's the landscape like? What's the community like? Are you well received? Are you well liked? Are you considered to be denominationally in line or out of line? Are you connected to a church? What is your and your husband's position there in the community?
We attended different churches, and we actually felt called out of the church into a freer walk, just to walk as disciples. We don't even use the term Christians, but we're disciples of Yeshua. And he showed us through home church, home worship, and of course getting back to the very Word of God. In the book of Acts we have New Testament, and throughout it was a very simple way that he called his disciples to walk. So we came to walk that way. Our reception as a health food store was good. We had good quality products at a good price. When people came in, we didn't try to force anything on them, but we were very available for any conversation. And we did meet with people after hours as well. Our home was above the store, so we really lived and worked there 24 hours a day. And it was a wonderful time where the Lord brought people into us. Now what happened was my husband was coaching wrestling and football, and he was discouraged or concerned that the boys would get sick during the season. And he sincerely began to work on getting nutrients into them without the calories, without the food, to first of all, just support their health so they wouldn't get colds and flus and mono. And then he found that as he began to develop these products and this whole idea of what he called biomolecular nutrition, that not only did it protect the health of the athlete, but help the athlete's progress. So that was really the first stepping stone, if you will, for Daniel Chapter 1 to grow beyond a health food store. And we began with biomolecular and nutritional principles to develop our own products. And that's something that changed for us very early on.
So you began developing concoctions, if you will, cocktails of different arginine and lysine and all these other things together that he found were effective in immunity support, in metabolic support, and his athletes were responding to it. So it was homeopathic, almost custom blended homeopathic based on the knowledge, research, and experience.
A little bit more naturopathic than homeopathic. The Lord allowed Jim to develop a computer program. Again, this was in the early days. We had only had Daniel chapter 1 for about a year. He was busy coaching. And this computer program he developed could actually assess the needs of the person, and in this case the athlete, for protein, carbohydrates, and fat. So it took the guesswork out of it. The biomolecular nutritional products he developed were protein, carbohydrates, very little fat, nutrients, but more as you would find it in nature, like whole foods. But biomolecular nutrition, those foods have been pre-digested, so broken down with enzymes. That's the whole process. So the advancement here is really a delivery process, a delivery advancement. So for the athlete, you can drink it instead of eating food, and that energy is available immediately for when you go out onto the field. And you can drink it before, during, and after these biomolecular nutritional shakes to, first of all, replenish what you're losing. And the great advantage for the person who's sick, same thing as with an athlete, you don't want your energy going to digest. You want maximum assimilation and no energy required to digest. So that's what Jim found quite accidentally, that working with the athletes and simultaneously with sick people, he got great results using these biomolecular nutritional shakes.
And so what did you do with that? Did you go out to any agency or any doctor or any medical group to say, hey, we're finding great results with this, or align yourself with anybody in the homeopathic community that could validate that? I mean, all these ingredients were off the shelf. You were just mixing them together in a particular way. So
Right.
It wasn't that you were introducing anything new into the process.
Correct. They were all licensed laboratories that Jim got in touch with to make them. All the ingredients are GRAS according to the government, and that's generally recognized as safe. We're really talking foodstuffs that, again, have been created in a special way, enhanced with enzymes, so that no digestion is required. And in answer to your question, Jim did reach out. He was in contact with doctors even worldwide. He had labs, he had big name companies come to us because of the results we were getting. And they were curious, what are you doing? How are you using these things? And yet each step along the way, we would end up being stymied. For instance, there was a big cancer hospital, Dana-Farber in Boston, whose patients were using our products, and they were doing so well that the hospital called and they asked about that. And they were sending people to us for one product we had specifically, Mega Gains. And the people going through their chemo treatments weren't losing weight, they were staying strong. And at one point a family called and said, do you have anything else? And Jim said, yeah, we have a lot of products. And then the hospital got angry, they got scared. And they said, you can't tell anybody about anything else you have. And they basically cut us off. Again, the nutritionist there was scared because there's, powers that be that are dictating to everyone what you can and cannot do.
So what action came out of this? What they in your opinion, what stimulated the response, and then what followed on from there?
The response, do you mean from the government ultimately?
Yes.
Well, the government attacked us almost 30 years after we had been in business with our ministry. No consumer ever complained. People were happy. Thousands of people were being healed of all kinds of illness, including cancer. And that was the thing that really got us. We posted testimonies. We believe that was our legal right to do so. Testimonies in people's own words of how they had been healed of cancer. And we put the disclaimer, and we put that it was a record and a testimony to the Lord to share these stories. So the government, there's a little background to it, but first I'll share that the government did an internet sting, a literal witch hunt, where they put in the word cancer and the word cure, and 130 or so companies popped up, and we were one of them. And they just simultaneously attacked all those companies. Everybody folded, either ran away or paid a fine, and we were the only ones who stood and fought. Now, the background to that witch hunt was the Trilateral Cooperation Charter, the TCC, under the Trilateral Commission, which was a working group. They had formed this group, MUCH, M-U-C-H, Mexico, United States, Canada Health Fraud Group, with the intent to suppress any natural treatment of cancer. And as a side note, the US FTC and the FDA signed on to the Trilateral Cooperation Charter illegally. They didn't tell Congress, they didn't keep their minutes. It was a very clandestine thing. But they formed this group, MUCH, and that's what triggered this whole Operation False Cures that netted us and the 130 or so other companies.
So here you find something that's effective, something that works, something that gets real results. And the truth of the matter is it's fearful to Big Pharma.
Absolutely. We were very threatening to Big Pharma, threatening to the government, really, because of the information we shared with people. It empowered them. Our information was a threat even ideologically to the government. But we have no doubt that Big Pharma was behind that internet sting, Operation False Cures, and the letter that we were being forced to sign and send to all our customers.
And so what the wording of the letter stated exactly what?
The government ordered that we print this letter on our letterhead, put it in our envelope, send it to all our customers with no accompanying letter, and there's a signature line at the bottom. And the gist of the letter was that only conventional cancer treatment has been proven safe and effective in humans. So if you have cancer, you need to go to a cancer doctor. And at the bottom of the letter was the contact for the NCI, the National Cancer Institute. And that was our line in the sand. From the very beginning, we refused to sign that letter.
So if I get healed of cancer because I start making kelp shakes and use sea urchin squishings and I create my own and my cancer gets cured, or in the case of many people that I've prayed for, their cancer was healed.
Yes.
Those are things that would mean you don't have to spend the millions and billions of dollars on the pharmacological solutions out there. Can the government do this? Is this within their purview to say that people cannot? Are they saying you can't claim that something does something if it's not proven to do it based on CDC or FDA, but that you aren't allowed to do it at all?
Well, the FTC rule is that you cannot make a health claim without reasonable basis. Now, we had plenty of reasonable basis. We had traditional herbal knowledge. We derived things from the Bible, and we had plenty of anecdotes. And even though one anecdote is not strong evidence, many of them, collected, that begins to weight the evidence. However, even if the government wants to say that's still weak evidence, we never put out that we had double-blind placebo-controlled studies. We had reasonable basis for everything we shared. What they turned the reasonable basis into in court was, in fact, double-blind placebo-controlled studies, which is the gold standard for drugs. And we didn't need those, but they played this game in court where legally they said that that's what we had to have, and because we didn't have that, they charged us with false and misleading information, false and misleading advertising.
So let me summarize for a minute. maybe while you silence the phone that's ringing in the
I'm
background.
so sorry about
Yeah.
that.
You put together a, I don't like the word concoction, so a blend of various nutrients and all things that are readily available, nothing which is pharmacological, nothing which
Correct.
is chemical, all derived from natural ingredients,
Correct.
and mix them together in a particular way and are finding individual results.
That is correct. It was also the way that we found to use things. Now, specifically about cancer, which is what we were initially attacked about, we found a three-prong approach, and that is to first stop the growth of the tumor, and shark cartilage has the ability to do that. It cuts off the blood supply, so it's anti-angiogenic. You want to boost the immune system. You want to detoxify the blood and the lymph. And last but not least, we would employ enzymes to help break that tumor down, which is excess protein. So, and we found that through years of reading and study, and we ended up talking to doctors, some of them renowned, world-renowned doctors who were working with natural things with cancer. And so we had gleaned all this information, and we began to share it with people, and one after another, as they got well of all kinds of cancer, we realized that this was really something effective that the Lord had shown us, which was an answer to prayer. We had asked him, how do we use your creation, to heal illness and to help people heal illness?
So the government comes after you and puts you on trial for making false statements. And the
Correct.
specific false statement that they claim that you made was what precisely?
Well, that's a good question, because what they charged us with were statements we never made. They said, in parentheses, 7-herb formula cures cancer. We never made that claim. And we told our lawyer that, and we went through all the material we had. Nowhere did we say that. What the government, the FTC, came back and said is you implied it. So we were charged with implied claims, not express claims, which is scary. Then the government can say you mean anything that they want to say you mean.
Did your lawyers look at the code? Did they cite code violations with chapter, line, article, as they do in a recitation of charges, that it's in violation of Section 1, Paragraph 3, Subsection 2, Article 6? Did they have that specifically in their charge against you?
They did. We had. Are you talking about our lawyers or the government?
The government in their charges.
Yeah, they pulled from the Food and Drug Act. Again, it had to do with this idea that you cannot make health claims without a reasonable basis. And they have that on the books. But in court, what they did was reach beyond that. And they added to it by saying reasonable basis only could be satisfied by double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. And when that was, argued that they were adding to the word of the law, the rule of the law, what they said was, well, it's cancer, it's such a serious illness, we have to take greater measures or something to that effect. You have free speech and commerce as long as it's not false and misleading. So they charged us with false and misleading advertisement, really in order to shut us down. Again, there was a whole agenda from the beginning, and it was to silence us and shut us down. I believe we were threatening, because our products were effective, because no one was complaining, nobody had been hurt, not in 30 years.
What do you think triggered this change? I mean, there was obviously things were going along fine. You were seeing results. You were profitable as a ministry, not meaning profitable mean making loads of money, but you were profitable in being able to plant and help churches overseas. You were able to operate a successful business operation that generated revenues. You and your husband could live, pay your rent, and support a ministry.
Yep.
What changed along the way? Usually in cases like this, there's a disgruntled somebody. There's an unhappy somebody that says, hey, they told me that this was going to, so I went away from conventional. I didn't go to any chemotherapy. I didn't go to any radiation. I fired my oncologist, and I'm drinking this Daniel 1 shake, and now I've been told I have 2 months to live, and it's because they convinced me that I was going to get cured, and I didn't. Usually that's when these things come to the surface.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, and amazingly, that never happened and had nothing to do with our case and the government attack. And our lawyers found it quite amazing that in 30 years we had not had a single consumer complaint. That's almost unheard of in business. Certainly you're going to find someone disgruntled, but that never happened. And we trust the Lord, and we trust fully that it was His grace and mercy. Daniel chapter 1 was of Him, and He protected it for 30 years, blessed a lot of people through it. And the way I see it is, once He removed that hedge, because He's sovereign and for whatever reason, but once that hedge was removed, the enemy could attack us. It was because of that operation, the witch hunt. It wasn't only us, it was about 130 companies they went after. And maybe at that point in time, at least in a worldly explanation, perhaps we had become successful enough to even be on their radar. In other words, they did an internet search. They put in the word cancer, the word cure. 130 companies popped up, and perhaps we were doing enough business online, or we had enough of a presence that we popped up with the 130. And our first lawyer said that was a bit of a fluke because we're a tiny little ministry, but Jim and I felt it was no fluke. Again, God is sovereign, and He had us in there. We were, again, the only ones who stood, so perhaps that's why, just one reason why maybe, so that we could stand and expose all the corruption in medicine and in the judicial system.
So this went to court.
Yes.
And the title of your book is called To Stand, How a Small Christian Ministry Courageously Stood Up to Government Tyranny. How many stood with you?
No one. It was only Jim and I, only Daniel chapter 1 at the FTC level. Now, that was a civil court case. They were so angry that we were fighting them. A couple of years into it, we were raided in our little humble place in Rhode Island. And at that point, the FDA jumped in, the CID, and the IRS. And no doubt it was to intimidate us. It was to punish us because we stood against the FTC. But it was at that point that criminal charges were brought. Now, we were the only ones who stood against the FTC. So here we were alone, now having, basically these other agencies gang up on us and the full weight of the government on us.
We're talking with Tricia Feijo, author of Called to Stand, How a Small Christian Ministry Courageously Stood Up to Government Tyranny, brought to us by our good friends, World Ahead Press, and WND Company. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the court case, we're going to talk about the conviction, we're going to talk about your husband going to prison, and we're going to talk about where this sits today in the field of biomolecular nutrition, and fast forwarding to where you are today as you still operate Daniel chapter 1 as a ministry. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, We've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Tricia Feijo, author of Called to Stand, How a Small Christian Ministry Courageously Stood Up to Government Tyranny. Tricia, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
So kind of take us on a timeline. This all began, I believe, 1986.
Correct. We founded Daniel chapter 1 in 1986.
Okay. And you operated that as a ministry, which was an outreach to churches to help plant churches and support churches in the former Soviet Union.
In not only China, Israel, And
Okay.
we continued to travel as missionaries, as independent missionaries, and we would bring money to the house churches in different places.
Okay. And during this process of operating a health food store, your husband got involved in this area called biomolecular nutrition as a coach and began to concoct, if you will, various natural ingredients together into protein shakes and things that were keeping his team healthy, and you saw great results with that, but you didn't turn it into a marketable product per se and package it yourself. Is that correct?
Well, we did have labs private label for us, and we grew to have almost 200 products in our product line. Chiropractors around the country carried our product line. We eventually did away with the food. This was in the first decade of Daniel Chapter 1. We did away with the food and we streamlined, so we really became the Daniel Chapter 1 dietary supplement company. And we had great success with athletes as well as with sick people, as well as, healthy people. And again, we continued to travel. We went to China, to Israel. We marched in Tiananmen Square with the Chinese students. We were there baptizing people in Tiananmen Square during the uprising. We were in Berlin when the Berlin Wall came down. It was really quite an exciting time that the Lord allowed us to travel really all over the world, ministering to people. And again, Daniel Chapter 1 was funding the ministry, the mission that we were on.
So at some point in this process, people are starting to derive benefits, including cancer remission. And this comes to the attention of a hospital or a group of medical practitioners who then turn your name over to the Food and Drug Administration?
I don't believe that's what happened. No, they simply, Dana-Farber, the cancer hospital, simply stopped sending people to us. That might have been 10 years before we were sued by the Federal Trade Commission. We actually were on radio all over the country. We had a community that liked our information. We were sharing information. People were being cured of things, including cancer, again, all over the country. But I believe, from what we know, it was in around 2007 that the FTC was part of an internet sting. They conducted a witch hunt, and they put in cancer and cure into the computer, and maybe the first 130 companies that popped up, they grabbed. It went something like that, is what I've been told. Nobody ever complained. Our lawyers said that that had nothing to do with the attack against us.
So federal charges are brought against you, and you're taken to federal court and prosecuted for violation of Federal Trade Commission interstate commerce, or what were the categories that they charged you in?
Well, it's an interesting thing. The FDA actually recycled, they just rehashed the FTC case, which was false and misleading advertisement having to do with 4 primary products people were using and being healed of cancer with. And the Food and Drug Administration is only supposed to have jurisdiction over labels, and our labels were all compliant, FDA compliant. They had the FDA disclaimer box. They made no claims whatsoever. So the original Federal Trade Commission complaint was against our information, but the FDA somehow got away with just recycling that case, which was about information, marketing and advertising. And they just made a criminal case out of it and charged us, amongst other things, with putting unapproved drugs on the marketplace. And we found that very offensive, that they referred to God-given herbs and nutrients as drugs.
Right.
And we fought that. And ultimately, and you can ask me about that, but my husband did enter a plea deal.
So he did enter a plea deal on this.
He did, yeah, the drug thing, and he was so upset, and he said to our lawyers, can't we change the wording? I just don't want that word in there. I stand against drugs. And we actually both had been indicted, and were both potentially facing some maybe serious prison time. And the plea deal, as negotiations dragged on, they finally said to my husband, we'll drop everything against your wife. They promised him no prison time. And they said, just admit to putting unapproved drugs in the marketplace and not taking withholding tax from alleged employees for 2007, 2008. And Jim and I looked at the list of people, and many of them were people our ministry had simply gifted. And Jim said they weren't employees. And our lawyers said, if you don't enter a plea deal, the government's going to harass every one of those people. So I believe it was really more to protect others than even myself. But he entered the plea deal so that other people would be left alone. And the government did give him prison time after all.
So he enters a plea agreement and says, I'll confess to what?
That he put unapproved drugs on the marketplace.
And
which is, they were drugs, but they weren't. And being unapproved means unapproved by the FDA, that we didn't go through an approval process with the FDA, which, by the way, is monetarily impossible for a natural product. It would cost $100 million to bring one of our products, to a FDA approval. We never sought that. We never claimed to have that. The other charge that he pled guilty to was not taking withholding tax from employees for 2007 and 2008.
So where do things stand now?
Well, Jim is out of prison. He went for 6 months house arrest after that. And he's still on probation. He has a couple of years probation. The government has literally taken our last cent. They continue to harass us. They threaten to take property. We're just waiting on the Lord, trusting him. Meanwhile, we continue to minister as best we can. We don't have the products, but we minister, first of all, spiritually to people, as we always have. We have an open house. We conduct house, we have a house church. We worship in our home and in other homes. We break bread, remember the Lord. We believe in spiritual gifts, and we use those. We share the gospel with people.
So were these misdemeanors or felonies?
Jim was ultimately charged with a felony. The count of the said withholding tax, that was a felony charge. The other, I believe, was a misdemeanor.
So this is permanently on his record.
Correct.
And did this make any news? Was there any media coverage of this? Was there any uprising in the naturopath, homeopath, the natural foods community to rally behind you?
Unfortunately not. And that was one thing early on. Again, there were 130 companies that were attacked at the same time. We reached out to many of them. And everyone was just staying in their own little bubble. They were, afraid. We reached out to people not attacked because you might be next. And no one wanted to come near us. It's like we had the plague, so we really did have to stand alone. And as far as media coverage, it was all slanderous. It was very negative. We made headlines locally. Providence Journal, a couple indicted on selling bogus cancer cures. And the article was just riddled with falsehood. And people that know us knew that, and they were grieved by that. A local doctor wrote a couple of great editorial letters in our defense. But still, the damage was done, I would say. And proof that the government is hooked in with the media is initially when we lost our case in FTC court, the media knew before our lawyers knew, which meant the U.S. FTC contacted the media before even our lawyers.
So how many of these cases are going on now around the country?
I don't know. As far as the natural treatment of cancer, it's been going on for decades. There have been so many. Renee Casey, Dr. Ivy, Harry Hoxsey. People have had cures for cancer. There's not just one. The Lord has put things all over the world in his creation that can cure cancer. But they have always been persecuted and suppressed, at least for many, many decades. And the cases now, It's a good question. They keep people isolated. In our case, they even raided us at gunpoint. They didn't call in TV cameras. They really didn't want the public knowing that. That's what I believe. They purposely keep people like us very isolated, quiet. They do their smear campaign, locally, kind of quietly. But how many cases are ongoing? I don't know, but I know we weren't the first and we won't be the last.
So you've written this book called To Stand, kind of documenting what you and your husband went through. Is this an expose? Is this a wake-up call to the public to be aware?
I hope so. I believe a number of people now that have read it said it's a real eye-opener. And one brother in Christ said it's a clarion call for lukewarm Christians. Are you really walking in a way of truth, separate from the world? And of course, the deception is so great, the darkness is so great. Even the Lord's people, he said, may be deceived, can be, and many are walking in darkness and don't know it. But I hope that it is an expose, a light in the dark, the story that the enemy doesn't want getting out. And I hope it blesses people in that it's an inspiration, to their daily walk.
You went through this horrific time. You saw your husband imprisoned. What prompted you to write the book? What was the real motivation? It doesn't sound like you had a voice, and if you had a voice, there didn't seem to be an audience that was resonating with.
Yeah, I think I ultimately felt compelled that the story had to be told. And many people had asked us to write a book, had asked for this book, and I thought, the writing of books, there is no end, and, for what purpose? And, well, only if it glorifies God. I pretty much had settled in my own mind. But I felt really compelled all of a sudden, I believe, by the Holy Spirit, because it was important that the record be set straight, that the story be told, that the truth come out, again, to be a light in the darkness.
There is a faith factor to it. Is this book aimed toward a Christian market, or do you think that this is something that is a crossover?
It's for anyone. Actually, it's been somewhat surprising, delightfully so, that the book has been really well received by all kinds of people, all walks of life. They tell me that it's entertaining, and I tried to make it so. It's really a wonderful adventure story, kind of a love story, I suppose, between my husband and myself, and also us and the Lord. But there's nothing really distasteful that anyone finds, which is interesting. And I think because it's our story, and I'm telling our story, and people, no matter what their faith, can respect that we're supposed to have freedom in this country to walk according to our conscience, to walk according to our beliefs, as long as we aren't hurting anybody else.
Right. The book's been out since, what was the release date?
Oh, that would have been in October.
Okay. And what kind of responses are you getting? What kind of feedback from those who have already read it?
It's so far great, and I'm somewhat surprised because you expect to have your critics out there. So far, it's been all positive, honestly. People just like the story, and people are getting different things out of it. They're being inspired to a closer walk themselves, or they're very intrigued by the natural healing aspect. They don't know anything about natural healing, but it's made them, really stop and question, well, are there natural things for cancer? Because we all know chemo and radiation really isn't safe or effective.
Right. Now, are you restricted to participate in as a naturopath? Are you restricted in any way under this plea agreement from operating your ministry?
My husband is, I am not. No, they completely shuttered us in 2015. Overnight, completely shut us down. That, our lawyers said, was unprecedented. They had never seen it before. All 200 plus products we've been banned from selling. Now, my husband, that's for the next 20 years. He's 70, so until he's 90. He cannot be involved in any way with dietary supplements, marketing, advertising, developing, teaching. I, on the other hand, am not under the same order. So Daniel chapter 1 was shut down. That was the other part of the order, along with James Feijo. I, on the other hand, am free to do, as the Lord leads me, tells us I'm supposed to do. Now, I am a trained homeopath. That happened back in the early 90s. I went back to school, learned the science of homeopathy, practiced for many years, and I could potentially pick my practice back up. I would like to begin teaching also.
Do you think that if you step out there in any capacity that will draw any attention from the FDA or the FTC or the IRS?
I really think so. I feel like I have a mark on my forehead at this point, as my husband does. But I don't want fear to incapacitate me, to paralyze me, and keep me silent, because that would be the enemy, and I mean Satan. That would be the enemy winning. So I feel that I have to have the boldness that comes with the faith to do as I feel led to do. And if it's to speak out, to teach, to write, I will do that. Practice again, I'd like to do that.
Okay. Was your 501c3 status revoked?
We actually were a 508 corporation sole.
Okay. So 508, I'm not familiar with that chapter.
Yeah, it's a little different than a 501c3. It's similar in ways, but the reason Jim chose to structure it as a 508 is it completely takes the government out of it, in that they cannot tell you what you can do, what you can say. I know the Johnson Amendment, the Johnson Act, might be overturned by Trump, but as you know, the government has been able to tell pastors that they cannot, say, talk about politics, within the church. Well, we wanted to be completely free under the Messiah to walk and to speak, to preach what he tells us to. So the 508 corporation sole is just another structure where we are a church allowed to do business.
Now, are you operating now as a home church?
We continue the home church that we always had, but Daniel chapter 1 has been shut down.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so does the church have any denominational affiliation, or are you fully independent? Are people able to contribute to it as a tax-deductible contribution?
We're disciples of Yeshua, plain and simple, no denomination, non-denominational. Was the question, can people donate, and is it tax-deductible?
Yes.
I believe it would not be tax-deductible.
Okay.
According to our present structure, I think not.
Okay, so you're not operating as a nonprofit ministry in accordance with the IRS regulations.
Well, we actually were. And I'm not really sure the nuance of difference there, but I'm quite sure that it wouldn't be tax deductible, but the 508 corporation sole was a tax exempt. We were filed with the IRS, and it had tax exempt status.
Right. Yeah, there's a difference between a nonprofit and a tax exempt organization. So nonprofits are under 501c3 and the various statuses. A non-exempt or tax exempt means that you're not taxed, but you're not a charity or recognized as a nonprofit charity. You may be providing humanitarian services or other events which would not require you to pay taxes in the area of sales tax or in other areas of tax. And I'm not a tax person, so I'm just surmising that. So,
yeah, well, nor am I, and my husband always took care of all that, so that's why I'm not as informed.
So are you currently operating a website?
I have one for my book. The old Daniel chapter 1 website is still actually up there. It's not been updated, but my husband felt strongly that we should just leave it there because it is a testimony to the Lord Yeshua. And I have a website, and that's called tostand.com.
It's called tostand,
.com.
TOSTAND
Uh-huh.
.com. And I'm pulling it up now so that I can tell our audience. Well, it just kind of locked me out of it. Thestand.com.
Uh-huh.
Okay, it's my typo. Here we go. Here we go. This. No, that didn't. That changed it. That's odd. It seems to be having some problems with it.
Yeah, I don't know why that would be. Called, CALLED, to stand.
Called
It's
to.
the title of the book.
All right. I'm doing my best to pull it up now. Here we go. All right. So yes, looking on the website, there's ways to reach you, reviews of the book, a blog which you are currently writing, been talking about, still giving advice about using garlic, some information. How can people, other than buying the book, ordering the book at the WND Superstore? As a matter of fact, if they go to order the book at the WND Superstore, WNDSuperstore.com, and order the book, and you check out at the checkout stand, there'll be a code that you can put in, and if you put in the letters IAN, like our name, Igniting a Nation, IAN, that will then benefit our ministry as well as you benefiting Patricia in this move to tell the story of oppression. It is government intervention and government oppression, and a family who was strong enough to stand up against an institution that is unshakable and larger than most. What message do you have as we get ready to close this segment for those who feel that they are being victimized? They feel like they are the David and they are facing the Goliath the same way that you and your husband did. What would you say to them?
Well, I think it's important to take a stand, to not back down, to not run away, because that will only allow the powers that be to grow and become stronger. And I think too many good people, too many Christians certainly in this country, have really been silent too long. And if we don't begin to speak out and act accordingly to our faith, then, as our forefathers, the founding fathers of this nation warned, we will lose our freedoms, and we've already lost some. We're in danger of losing even more ground. I believe that there is a hope to regain some of the freedoms that we had. And even with our case, I don't think our story is necessarily over. Change comes slowly oftentimes, but it has to begin somewhere, and it takes for not just one person perhaps, but people, collectively, people to stand up for the truth, stand up for what's right, to overcome the evil.
Thank you for that. We've been talking to Tricia Feijo, author of Called to Stand, How a Small Christian Ministry Courageously Stood Up to Government Tyranny, brought to us by our good friends at World Ahead Press, the WND Company. You can get a copy of this at the WND Superstore, put in the code IAN, or get it at Amazon.com. Tricia, thank you so much for sharing your story. We wish you great success in getting the message out that God is still on the throne and that He still looks after His own. May the Lord always protect you. May He bless you and keep you and bless all the works of your hand. Thank you for being with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Rabbi Walker. Shalom.
Shalom. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.